Who are the Jews from the perspective of DNA? A religion? A people? Descendants of the ancient Levant? A mixture of different nations? Or all of these at once? Scientists collected samples from Jewish communities in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, India, and Ethiopia, and then compared them with large data sets from other populations. The question seemed purely scientific. But behind the test tubes stood 2,000 years of migration, marriage, restrictions, and attempts not to disappear. If a Jewish family lived in Poland for centuries, should its DNA become Polish? If it lived in Morocco, should it become Moroccan? If it lived in Iran or India, should it completely dissolve into the surrounding population? And can genetics answer a question that, for Jews, has never been merely biological, but also religious, familial, and historical? The answer was powerful precisely because it could not fit into a single convenient slogan. But to understand it, the story must be followed step by step. If calm historical analysis without racial myths or sensationalism matters to you, support this episode with a like and subscribe to the channel. The first explanation sounds simple. Jews are only a religious group. If that is true, Ashkenazi Jews should be genetically similar to Europeans, Sephardi Jews to Mediterranean peoples, Mizrahi Jews to their Middle Eastern neighbors, and Indian and Ethiopian Jews to the local populations around them. The logic is understandable. In one home, people spoke Yiddish, in another, Ladino, in a third, Arabic or Persian. Food, clothing, and the pronunciation of prayers changed. Marriages took place, and people converted to Judaism. Why would hereditary traces not become completely mixed? In 2010, a study by Gil Atzmon and his colleagues compared 7 Jewish groups: Iranian, Iraqi, Syrian, Italian, Turkish, Greek, and Ashkenazi Jews. The researchers did not find a simple genetic match with the populations of the countries in which these communities lived. Instead, they identified distinct clusters connected by shared Middle Eastern ancestry, combined with varying degrees of European and North African admixture. This does not mean that Jewish identity can be determined by a blood test. Judaism accepts converts, and belonging to the Jewish people existed long before genetics. But if Jews were only a religious association without a shared hereditary history, the genetic picture of many diaspora communities would look very different. This leads to the opposite explanation. Jews are a single ancient group that barely mixed with other peoples. That also sounds convincing. For centuries, marriages in many communities were arranged primarily within the group. Religious boundaries, pressure from surrounding societies, and direct legal restrictions reinforced separation. A Jewish quarter could stand in the center of a major city, while the social boundary around it remained rigid. But the isolation was never absolute. People moved from one community to another. After the expulsion from Spain at the end of the 15th century, Sephardi families settled in North Africa, Italy, the Ottoman Empire, and the Middle East. Ashkenazi centers moved from German-speaking lands farther east. Every road left a trace. DNA does not reveal a sealed capsule. It reveals people who preserved a connection to their origins while living among real neighbors. The third explanation reduces the entire subject to only one of its branches: the idea that Jewish genetic history is primarily the history of Ashkenazi Jews. This impression did not appear without reason. Ashkenazi Jews are widely represented in medical and commercial databases. Their ancestry is often identified by genetic tests as a distinct cluster. This group also displays a strong founder effect, a situation in which a future large population descends from a comparatively small ancestral base, causing certain rare genetic variants to become more common among descendants. But Ashkenazi Jews are not the entire Jewish people. There are Sephardi, Iranian, Iraqi, Syrian, Yemenite, Moroccan, Georgian, Bukharan, Indian, Ethiopian, and many other Jewish communities. The Jewish diaspora was not one road, but a network of roads. This creates an apparent contradiction. Many Jewish groups are not genetic copies of their neighboring populations, but neither are they an unchanged group that never mixed with outsiders. Two forces operated simultaneously throughout their hereditary history: preservation and admixture. For a family, this did not look like a scientific diagram. It looked like a Sabbath table in Krakow, a letter from Salonika, a prayer book from Baghdad, a marriage contract from Fez, or a bag of belongings waiting beside the door after yet another expulsion. In one city, a child heard Yiddish, in another, Ladino, in a third, Arabic, Persian, or Malayalam. Faces and cuisines differed, but the memory of belonging to one history endured. What families pass down through names, customs, and sacred texts, genetics detects in another way, through hereditary traces that survived across centuries. We have reached the halfway point of this story. If analyses like this help separate science from myth, write in the comments which country and city you are watching from. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now the correct standard must be established. DNA does not answer the question of who is a real Jew. It does not measure faith, knowledge of the Torah, family memory, or acceptance by a community. Genetics does something else. It compares populations, searches for common ancestors, detects admixture, and identifies demographic bottlenecks. DNA does not define the Jewish soul. It reveals the roots of Jewish history. One of the best-known roots is connected with Ashkenazi Jews. In 2014, a team led by Shai Kami studied complete genomes and reconstructed a comparatively recent demographic bottleneck. Their model produced an effective population size of approximately 250 to 420 people around 25 to 32 generations ago. This is why simplified accounts often refer to roughly 350 founders. It is important to understand that this is not the literal number of all Ashkenazi Jews who were alive at the time. It is a mathematical estimate of how narrow the genetic foundation of the future population had become. Afterward, the community expanded rapidly. Rare hereditary variants present in the small ancestral population could become considerably more common among its descendants. This is how the founder effect works. It says nothing about a person's intelligence or value. It is a matter of demography. For this reason, the medical history of Ashkenazi Jews frequently includes references to Tay-Sachs disease and certain variants of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. The United States National Cancer Institute estimates that pathogenic BRCA variants occur among Ashkenazi Jews at a frequency of approximately 1 in 40. However, testing only for the 3 well-known founder variants may fail to detect other mutations. Carrier screening programs for Tay-Sachs disease, which began in the 1970s, reduced the number of children born with the condition among Ashkenazi Jews by approximately 90%. But the most cinematic development did not take place in a modern clinic. It took place in a medieval cemetery in the German city of Erfurt. Researchers obtained genomic data from 33 Jews buried there during the 14th century. The study showed that the founder effect within the Ashkenazi population had already begun before the 14th century. At the same time, the medieval Jews of Erfurt were more genetically diverse than modern Ashkenazi Jews, particularly in the proportion of ancestry associated with Eastern Europe. It was as though an archive had opened, not on paper, but inside human bones. Erfurt demonstrated that the modern Ashkenazi genetic cluster did not emerge as a single, direct, unchanging line. Different ancestral layers existed within the medieval community, and later moved closer together and mixed. Only now can the central conclusion be revealed. The studies confirmed neither the formula, Jews are only a religion, nor the idea of an unchanging people with pure blood. Many Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi communities do preserve a shared Middle Eastern genetic foundation. But that foundation is combined with European, North African, and other regional layers, depending on the historical root of each individual community. Jewish DNA does not say, everything remained unchanged. It says, the connection survived, but the journey left its mark. A study by Doron Behar and his colleagues compared 14 Jewish communities with 69 non-Jewish populations from the Old World. Most of the Jewish samples formed a closely related subcluster. However, Ethiopian Beta Israel Jews and the Indian Bene Israel and Cochin Jewish communities were positioned closer to neighboring local populations. At the same time, researchers identified paternal connections to the Levant among the Bene Israel. A study of Cochin Jews also detected an influx of ancestry associated with Yemenite, Sephardi, and Middle Eastern Jewish populations approximately 13 to 22 generations ago. A community could therefore be simultaneously local and connected to the wider Jewish diaspora. This is where the most dangerous misunderstanding collapses. Genetic similarity between an Ethiopian or Indian Jew and the surrounding population does not make that person less Jewish. Jewish belonging existed through religion, law, communal recognition, family memory, and shared destiny long before laboratories existed. Genetics reveals the history of populations, not the value of human beings. This subject proves neither superiority, pure blood, nor the right of a commercial DNA test to decide who belongs to a people. Not all Jews are genetically identical, and hereditary diseases must never be turned into racial characteristics. A people is not only DNA. It is memory, faith, law, language, family, recognition, destiny, and history. 4 things should be remembered. Many diaspora communities share a Middle Eastern genetic foundation, but every branch also carries regional traces. Ashkenazi Jews passed through a severe demographic bottleneck. Erfurt showed that this process began before the 14th century. And Indian and Ethiopian Jews remind us that genetics cannot contain the full meaning of Jewish identity. The results of these studies are astonishing, not because they reveal a sensational secret about blood. They are astonishing because of their complexity. DNA does not replace the Torah. It does not replace history. It does not replace memory. It does not decide who has the right to call themselves Jewish. But the human body preserves traces of the journey: migration, marriage, isolation, catastrophe, return, and survival. Jewish history is recorded not only in books and prayers. Sometimes its traces remain within life itself, the life that earlier generations managed to pass on.